Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We're just going to give everybody the usual kind of minute or so just to find their way into the webinar room this morning. Delighted you can join us. Hope the sun's shining wherever you are. Just so we know everything's working, you should be able to hear me. You should see Rowan and I on screen. So perhaps just pop something in the chat box. Let us know that's working okay. Tell us where you are this morning, and if you've got blue skies like Rowan and I have. We're both sitting in Norfolk at the moment, and the sun is shining. So hopefully it is where you are as well. We will just get screens and things ready to kick off in about 10 seconds or so time. The chat box is working. It's always good to see that. So we've got Amy in Bexhill, we've got Jan in Leicester, Johnny in London, blue skies in London. Excellent. Great. Let's get underway. In terms of housekeeping this morning, we always schedule an hour for these, but I like to try and finish in about 45 minutes. It just means if you've got an on the hour or on the half-hour appointment, then we give you a chance to go and grab a cup of coffee or something before you're on to your next call. Delighted to have Rowan with me today. We'll do some introductions in just a moment. We love these sessions to be interactive, so if you have any questions at all during the course of the session, pop them in the Q&A box. If you've got any general observations or just want to be involved in the discussion, use the chat box. We'll keep an eye on that as we go through the session. So let's get underway. Hopefully you can see the slides there. We are talking this morning about AI. It is the topic of conversation on everybody's lips at the moment. We ran our app advisory theatre at Accountex last month, and AI sessions were rammed. They were packed out. So this has piqued everybody's interest. So we're looking forward to sharing some of the Karbon findings from their recent research with you during the session today, as well as getting some different perspectives from Owen and I in terms of what we're seeing, what we're hearing. So in terms of introductions, if you don't know who I am, my name is Will Farnell. I founded Farnell Clark back in 2007, and I was one of the co-founders of App Advisory Plus back in 2009. Rowan worked with us for a while in the App Advisory Plus team before he went off to Karbon. So delighted to get back on a session with Rowan. Rowan, do you want to just give a quick introduction so everybody knows who you are?
Yeah, morning everyone. My name's Rowan. I'm a customer success manager at Karbon. I help firms onboard to Karbon primarily, as well as working on some integrations with our API and Zapier and tools like that. I was also an accountant in practice before I joined App Advisory Plus. So implemented Karbon and now help others implement Karbon.
Excellent, and we'll come on to what Karbon is for anybody that doesn't know in just a moment, Rowan. But what are we going to talk about today during this session? We've done some welcomes and introductions. This is largely feedback, really, from a piece of research that Karbon did. If you haven't seen some of Karbon's research, it's really worth looking at. They carry out regular surveys amongst accountants globally. Really valuable insight, and this topic was no different. So Rowan's going to take us through some of the key findings from those. Essentially, that comes down to what's the current state of AI in the accounting profession, what's the impact it's having and likely to have. We're going to talk about the top 3 use cases of AI in accounting and where those things can be applied. Clearly, wherever there is opportunity, there is also challenge. So we'll talk about some of the challenges, the threats, but also the opportunities that AI presents and gives you the opportunity to utilize in your accounting and bookkeeping firms today. We will think about what you should consider when integrating AI into your practice. Now, that's going to be a really interesting topic in terms of the number of firms that are likely to go out and do this off of their own back compared to the number of firms that are going to be dependent on their app partners. In this case, Karbon, but also in other tools that we use, because for the majority, we're going to be dependent on those tech partners providing us the tools to utilize AI effectively. And then we'll touch on how Carbon is building functionality to help accounting firms with their efficiency. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end, but equally, if anybody has any questions during the session, pop them in the box, and we will try and tackle them as they come up at the right opportunities. So that's the plan. As I say, we will do that for the next 40 minutes or so. Keep the questions coming in. So just to kick off, Rowan, do you want to just talk through briefly who Carbon are, where you've come from, what you do, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just get into slides my side. Hopefully you can see that okay.
All
Um,
good.
yeah, so if you've not heard of Carbon before, we're a collaborative practice management tool. We're cloud-based and we service kind of small to mid-tier firms. In essence, everything that you can see in the diagram here is kind of what we aim to provide for you. So it's like work, communications management, automation, analytics, all centralized in one place. So you get peace of mind of where every job stands, who's working on what's being said to clients, and get all of that information provided to you in reporting and analytics that can help you make better decisions. We also have time tracking budgets and recently introduced WIP management, billing and payments. And that's something that will continue to be built out over the course of the coming months and years. And we have comprehensive API and integrations to lots of different apps that we will continue to develop on. We release features roughly every 3 weeks, and we've got a really highly engaged community of firms that feed into our product roadmap globally. In terms of our UK footprint, we've got a number of team members on the ground here. The UK is our fastest growing market, and as far as I'm aware, we're actually the only practice management platform in the UK to have embedded AI, or at least we were the first to market with that. AI is a core part of our roadmap, and you'll see some of the features that we already have in this session, as well as some of the things that we'd like to build out that are going to come down the road. So as Will said, the things that we're going to go through today draw on our research that we did earlier this year, that we presented in a report called The State of AI in Accounting. You can download that from our website. So to start with, we'll go through some of the sentiment, I guess, that came out from that report. And there's really two ways to define that. So the first is impact on individuals, and then impact on the firm. And so to start with the individuals, what we saw is that there's a bit of a difference in how people are feeling about AI, depending on kind of what their role is in the practice. So it came out that firm owners had generally a more excited kind of feeling about it, and less skepticism, whereas other people in the firm tended to be a little bit more skeptical and less excited about it. And there's probably a few different reasons why that might be.
Just in terms of like setting the scene for this a little bit, Rowan, because I mean, it feels like the conversation around AI has kind of gone through the roof recently. So in the last 18 months or so. Now we probably know the reason for that, and that was the launch of ChatGPT 4. We're now at ChatGPT 4. Which was launched fairly hurriedly a couple of months back, primarily to beat Google, I think, to the announcement. But what we've got to remember is that we've been using elements of AI in the tools that many of us have been using. If you're using Dext or auto entry or Zero or QBO, whatever, you've been using elements of AI and machine learning since you started using those products. So we have to kind of take a lot of this with a pinch of salt. It feels like everything's happened now, but it's the pace of development. So even if you look at what OpenAI did with the move from ChatGPT 4 to 4.0 in as little as 18 months, it kind of gives you a sense of the pace of development. And this is what we've got to be really conscious of, because those that have heard me speak before will know that we were very early adopters of cloud accounting. And one of the challenges I'm levying to many people at the moment is that if we think about the rates of adoption of those firms that are doing cloud accounting properly at the moment, are 15 years after we started on our journey with that, we are still only at about 20% of firms that are using it properly. So to think that everybody's going to go out tomorrow and just start doing stuff with AI is probably misguided. Although there is the counter argument, of course, that does the opportunities with AI almost kind of catapult over the need for some of the core cloud accounting processes that many of us will have adopted over the last kind of 5, 10, 15 years. But what's really interesting, and I think is something that I hope sets the scene for the rest of this session. I was at an event recently and a guy was speaking who was the former chief envisioning officer at Microsoft. And he talked about some McKinsey research that had been done. And originally, McKinsey had said that about 60% of everything we do in work today, we won't need to do by 2042. That original piece of research was done about 3.5 years ago. Um, After ChatGPT was launched, they went out and they redid the research. And what they said when they did it second time round was that we got it wrong. So it isn't going to be 60%, it's actually going to be 60 to 70% of what we do today, we're not going to need to do in the future. And it's not 2042, it's 2030. So what McKinsey are saying, who are strategy consultants who generally say pretty sensible stuff, 60% of everything we do in work today, we're not going to be doing in 6 years' time. So the challenge there is the opportunity that comes from that. Because if you stop doing 60% of everything you're doing today, how are you going to use that 60%? How are you going to deploy that 60% of capacity to continue to be valued by the clients that you serve? So I hope that kind of frames and provides some context for some of the stuff that we're going to talk about during the session here. What's really interesting in this first piece of kind of feedback from the report is clearly it's the business owners that are seeing more of the opportunity. It's interesting that both whether you're in an organization as an employee on front line, or you're the business owner, the level of intrigue around AI is fairly consistent across both. The shift is in those that are excited and those that are skeptical. And the skeptical and scared comes from a fear of perhaps the unknown. But what if you've got members in your team, what we've got to be doing is we've got to be having these conversations to start to position the opportunities that technology is going to create and AI is going to create. And AI is just an extension of some of the automation tools that we've successfully embedded that haven't necessarily done people out of jobs. So I think it's really important that we have those conversations.
And one of the things that's not shown here, but also was in the report, is that actually there's quite a low trust in the AI that people are trying to like get on board with right now. I think less than 25% people trust it out of
Yeah.
what was coming out of it. So even if the AI does get to a stage where it's that good, it still has that hurdle to overcome of trust.
Yes.
But I think personally, like this is quite interesting because people will be concerned about replacing their role effectively maybe being replaced, right? And it kind of goes back to that pace of change. Like your identity as an accountant could completely change in the next 6 years, which is
Yeah.
not a very long amount of time. Um,
I think
yeah,
so.
go
I think what's really interesting here is if we think about what Microsoft have done with Copilot. Sage have also launched an AI productivity tool, also called Copilot. And I think there's a lot in that language and that terminology, because if we think about the analogy of self-driving cars, I'm shameful to say it on a public forum, but I drove a Volvo not that long ago. It was an XC90, and the car would drive itself as long as I had a finger on the steering wheel. So as long as pressure was applied to the steering wheel, the car would use its adaptive cruise control to brake and accelerate. It would use lane keeping to keep me in lane, but it wouldn't let me take my hands off the wheel. So it was a co-pilot. It wasn't an autopilot. And I think when we think about AI, the fact that the language that's been used has talked about co-pilots, because the analogy I use is that you might get AI to do something that you might get a new trainee member of staff to do. And you wouldn't say to a new member of staff, can you go and do some research on HMRC's website, draft an email to our clients about changes to national insurance, and send it to the clients? What you might ask them to do is do the research and draft the email for you to review and you to make changes and you send it to a client. And in the same way, we could ask ChatGPT to go and research the changes to national insurance using HMRC websites and draft an email that we can send to clients to tell them about the changes. But you still wouldn't send it without reviewing it first. And I think this is the point, that we're talking about AI as a productivity tool, an efficiency tool. And yes, it might let you reuse your junior staff to do something far more effective, far more productive, than some of the things that you could get AI to do for you, rather than using finite resource to do things that we can get technology to do for us. I think that the second quote here is actually really interesting, in that AI won't replace accountants. Accountants trained in AI will replace other accountants. Therefore, those accountants that aren't using AI, that aren't using the tools. And again, I go back to my point earlier, there isn't an expectation that all of us are going to go out and build our own AI. For me, the key here is that we need to be asking questions of our tech partners in terms of, what are you doing around AI? How are you going to utilize AI to make our job easier, more efficient, more profitable? And that's the key.
Yeah, and I think we're a long way off still. An AI system that's going to just manage everything, right? So, like you said, the
Yeah, absolutely.
validation is the key thing, and being able to utilize the tools that are available to speed up things that can be done with the review before you actually send out to the client.
Yes, this is about us using this technology for us to get closer to our clients. I almost feel that we've kind of gone full circle, and technology has enabled us to complete that circle in terms of getting back to having really great relationships with clients, because technology is doing more of what we historically have had to utilize human resource for, which takes them away from the stuff that really matters and stuff that clients really appreciate.
Mm. And so, as a firm, I think it's key that you're kind of open to um, staff being able to experiment in these areas, and definitely trying to invest in some of the learning around it that you can do. Like, um, I was having a look at the ACCA webinars and resources in prep for this, and there's actually loads out there. They email me like every day with a new AI webinar that they're doing, things like that. So I think as a firm, it's important to dedicate time for staff to be able to look at those things. And certainly, even at Karbon, we've got an AI task force internally that just says, like, how can we use AI to do things better that we're doing that takes us time. So just thinking about getting people together and talking about things like that is just a good starting point.
Yeah, I think this is a great quote from Chad Davis from Live CA, who I have the pleasure of knowing fairly well, and Chad is a prime example of somebody that has used technology to completely rethink the way that they operate as a business. Last time I spoke to Chad, they were a team of about 150 people, entirely remote. So an entirely remote business, with no physical office presence, supporting clients in Canada, and around the world in terms of their global subsidiaries. And Chad was able to use cloud technology very early on to enable that business model. And I think that we are going to attract the best talent if we are making the most of the technology that exists. It really does, as Chad said here, give us the opportunity to take kind of that talent uh, thing to another level, in terms of the way we can engage team members, the way we can excite and motivate a new breed of accountants, who understand the power of technology. So yeah, really useful.
Some of the other things that came out in terms of the firm impact, um, clearly lots of people think that there's going to be substantial changes to the accounting industry, and that's kind of confirmed what you said there about the McKinsey research, Will. But also people agree that it's like a competitive advantage for them. So that goes back to that quote, AI accountants are going to replace non-AI accountants. That's pretty clear
Yeah.
to me that that is going to happen. And that's why it's so important that people on the webinar do go and put things into action to try and get that advantage while it's there.
I think the point here is you're absolutely right, Ryan. It's about action, because when if anybody's familiar with kind of the market maturity curve, where we talk about early adopters, early innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards. So you've seen the kind of the bell curve, and when I talk about cloud accounting adoption, which is you could have overlaid these stats to cloud accounting 10 years ago. So if we went back 10 years ago and Karbon did a piece of research on the state of cloud accounting, in our profession, the likelihood is you would have seen similar stats for that. So 67% would have said, yeah, there's competitive advantage, in terms of utilizing cloud accounting. Yet 15 years on, we are still only just touching early majority. So whilst everybody's recognized that there is competitive advantage, while everybody's recognized that there are substantial changes, it requires us to look at our business models, rethink our business models, and say, how can I use this to actually capitalize on the competitive advantage that exists here? How are we going to use this technology to enable us to work smarter, to be able to deliver greater efficiency? That means we can be more price competitive, or we can offer more for the same money because we have capacity to do more. So it's absolutely about taking action. The substantial changes, and obviously this is research, and remember, my guess is, without wanting to kind of tone down what Karbon have done here, the respondents are more likely to be firms that are slightly further along that period of change. What we haven't seen yet with cloud accounting, and therefore we're a long way off seeing it with AI, is the scales tipping, so that enough of the clients out there see the benefits of the changes, which drives the change in behavior of the rest of the market. So we haven't got enough clients that have seen firsthand the benefit of using cloud accounting technology properly to see the benefits they get from real-time data. The fact that during Accountex, I did a few surveys that said less than 5% of firms are doing bookkeeping at least weekly for their clients. So only 5% of small businesses are getting up-to-date financial data on which they can make decisions. So until more of the profession is doing that, the scales are not going to tip to drive that changes in behavior. So yes, it's going to change. How quickly it's going to change depends on the second point, in terms of how quickly do we take action. How quickly do we recognize the opportunities for our firms and our clients and use that to drive more clients to say, well, actually, I'd rather have that than what I've got over here. Does that make sense, Rowan?
I think so. Well, yeah.
Thank you.
For me, it's just all about that action point. Just go and do some research, go and try something and see if it works. Pick vendors that do actually have some thought around AI and strategy on how that is going to come into the product.
Yeah.
Obviously, not all firms have the resource to go and understand like exactly the security implications of things, for example, or exactly how best use works, so that they're going to rely on vendors like us to try and help support them with that.
Yeah,
If you're
totally.
not using a vendor that is even thinking about it at all, then you're going to be left behind ultimately, is my thought on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. And if anybody is doing anything around considering changing technology at the moment, one of the top priority questions to potential technology partners is what's your AI strategy? Because we are not going to do it ourselves. We, as the majority of the accounting market, are not going to go out and build a team to build our own AI, to necessarily build our own chatbots. Yes, some will do it. But ultimately it's going to be our tech partners that are going to give us the tools to work smarter in the same way that we've relied on Dex and Auto Entry and Go Cardless and others to give us tools that enable us to work smarter. This is no different. So get that question to the top of your assessment criteria.
That actually segues us quite nicely into the next part of this, which is the top three use cases of AI in accounting, and this is only coming out of our survey, so it's not all of them necessarily, but the three things that came out top, and this is what people are using like right now, were supporting communication, task automation, and research, and this comprises of like various different things, I guess. So um, in the communication side of things, there's loads of stuff that you can think about there, that is going to be helpful, and some of that I'll show you what Karbon have done already. But composing emails, like I know that there's lots and lots of accountants that use Karbon that already use our AI or other AI systems to help communicate via email and writing reports, but also with kind of just summarizing information, right, and giving you key insights into what something is, without you having to read the entire thing, through summarization. Like AI is really good at looking at vast amounts of data and giving you summarizations that can help you quickly understand what is part of that communication.
Do you think, Rowan, that the reason and I know you're going to come on to the other two in a moment, but do you think the reason that certainly one and three here at a high is as a direct result of what's available right now in terms of ChatGPT, because the comms bit, the research bit is largely right in the wheelhouse of ChatGPT, isn't it?
Yeah, these are the things that are more prevalent now, I think, and more available now. So I would imagine that number two is going to go up to the top eventually,
Yeah, yeah.
because
And and
that's
and that and
where
that
more of
that
the gains are.
that in itself is really interesting, isn't it? Because actually task or automation is stuff that we have been utilizing for 10 years. And the fact that it's only at 36% now when many have been using workflow automation in tools for some time anyway, it kind of almost reinforces that point that people weren't relating that to AI, because if you've been using Dex for 10 years and you've been using automation and for workflows and things for 10 years. So it's not, it just seems strange that it's lower, but then I guess it's because the other things were less prevalent and ChatGPT has made them more prevalent because you can use ChatGPT to draft an email and go and do some research for you. And present findings and summarize documents and so on.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that that task automation side is also going to like extend above that machine learning part that we've seen already to
Yeah,
just something that can take on tasks independently of someone
yeah,
um, being there. So like yeah, I'd expect bookkeeping automation is going to extend beyond what something like Dex is doing now to actually
yeah,
do more of it independently, and then you're just reviewing it.
yeah,
I think that's an area that's key for disruption. You're talking about things like in audit, like tools to detect fraud or analyze vast sets of data and
yeah,
highlight things to you. Those are going to be already being used by larger accounting firms, but will become more available to mid-tier and smaller ones as well.
sure.
Um,
Excellent.
I think what's interesting is for the third point, I've not personally seen too many tools yet that are kind of looking at HMRC and then you're able to ask a question to that about tax research, and quickly get an answer that you trust. But I would imagine that that is going to become more readily available.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
seen I've seen some really good examples of that where people have so again, if you're not using, or if you are using ChatGPT, clearly you have a choice. There's a free version which is fairly open. You can pay for the paid version at about £20 a month, and I've seen some demos with the paid version where you can effectively create your own research bot. And one of the examples I saw was the one that I mentioned a moment ago around NI, where you can create a bot and tell it the parameters of the data that you want it to review. So you can create it and say, right, I only want you to use .gov.uk resources. I want you to go and find the changes from November 2023 on national insurance, and I'd like you to summarize the key changes for me. And ChatGPT went off. It did it. From that summary, you could say, could you turn this into an email that we can send to clients explaining the changes? So it went and turned it into an email. And that's an example of how we can use it for research, and make sure that we put the parameters around where it goes for its data. And the reason it had to be .gov.uk is you couldn't do HMRC specifically. But if you're using .gov.uk domains, then you would hope that that's going to be fairly robust and therefore findings that you can rely on. And again, there's still an element, somebody's got to check it to make sure that it kind of makes sense. But this is where the opportunities are for research. And as you rightly say, that's just going to grow as the data becomes more reliable and we deal with the risks of hallucination and everything else that the AI models can suffer from.
and looking at the big four, most of them have already brought out their own internal tax AI assistants to help with stuff like that. So
Yeah,
it's not going to be long before one is available for people to use.
indeed. Yeah.
Um, I think in terms of what you see that we can do, and then where accountants are in terms of this massive period of transformation,
Mm.
um, it's really important to understand like what you need to put in place to make sure that you're able to bring on some of these AI changes. One of the ones that I want to highlight here is the scattered data and systems, particularly when you're talking about internal information that you could get efficiencies from using AI. If you're not using a system like Karbon, where you've got all of this data in one place, it's going to make it more difficult for you to utilize some of these things in a secure
Yes.
way for sure. So,
Yeah.
and we've talked about this loads and loads before, but having that core set of data in one place that's up to date, accurate, that is what AI relies on. So if you don't have that in place, the AI insights that you might get from that are not going to be very good.
Yeah, and just to kind of provide some context for that, I mean, I get the opportunity to talk to lots of accounting firms, and let me assure you, if you're sitting there at the moment thinking, yeah, we've got that problem, you are certainly not alone. Most firms that I've had the opportunity to work with will have at least three data sets. Um, they will have a data set for their own billing system. They'll have a data set in their compliance tools. They'll have a data set that is used for kind of mail shots, which might also be in their practice management set, or that would be set four. So most firms will have at least three, possibly four or more different sets of data that are not integrated in any way. And unfortunately, that's down to the nature of our very fragmented compliance marketplace. That means most of the tools that we're using for core compliance are not able to have APIs connected to them. So this is a real challenge for us. And as Rowan said, if you want to use AI effectively in your own firm for analyzing the data that you have, step one is you've got to have a single source of truth. So finding tools that enable you to do that and building the processes to make sure that if you are stuck with another data set, you know which one is your single source of truth. And you try and make sure that they're as complete as they possibly can be. But on this, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we clearly don't have time to go through individually, but we are seeing remote working. We are seeing every firm struggling with recruitment and retention. Clients' expectations are undoubtedly increasing because of what's possible in their buying in other sectors. So the Amazon effect is one that I talk about regularly. It doesn't mean we have to be Amazon, but the expectations of clients are greater because of the way that they can order something on a Saturday and get it on a Sunday afternoon. That's shifting the way clients view what we do for them. And we've talked about the pace of change of technology. Back to
So
you.
we've already discussed this a little bit in terms of what you need to consider when you're integrating AI into practice, but some of the other things just to distill there. Data, obviously, integrity is important, as we discussed. Security and privacy is another key thing that you need to be aware of. So what I'd suggest is you need to be with a system that you control the data, and you need to be careful that you're not giving away confidential information as well. I mean, it might sound obvious, but if so maybe staff aren't aware of that, then that could be a key risk for you.
That's a really valid point. And if one of the things that I would urge everybody to do is, if you don't have one, create an AI policy in terms of how you are going to allow or not your team to utilize tools like ChatGPT, because clearly relying on ChatGPT to give tax advice right now is perhaps not the most sensible thing to do. So what is your policy? What are the parameters? Where can staff use AI? And what are the limitations that you want to place on that use, and the mechanisms, as Rowan said, that you put in place to mitigate and manage risk associated with utilizing AI in your day-to-day work.
Um, so in terms of Karbon and our AI, what we're doing here, we actually use Azure for ours, so it's completely secure. It's in your own region. We don't share the data outside of Karbon. It's all kept within your environment. We launched AI in May 2023, and some of the things that we initially started to look at here were how can we help firms with communication. So if you don't know Karbon already, you effectively manage your emails through here. So we've got all that data of your emails coming in and what's going out. And one of the earliest things that we did was how can we help you understand a long thread of emails? So everyone's probably familiar with this. You're included in a thread lower down. It's pages long. There's forwards involved and other people. How can you quickly get a feel for what that is? And so summarization was the first one that's come in, and it's probably our most used AI tool. You can summarize both notes and emails here to quickly understand something. And we've taken that a little bit further now into what we call a client timeline in Karbon. And this is allowing you to summarize more data. So if you've got a meeting with a client, you might want to find out what the pulse is on their interactions with you. So again, the same thing here in terms of the summary. You can summarize up to 10 email and note conversations. And this is going to be extended further as we continue with our AI development. And because we have such a rich source of data, I guess, of what work we're doing for your firm, the time that's been spent on tasks, what invoices are going out and overdue or have been paid, we're going to be able to provide you with this really rich summary that you can use when you're going into conversations with clients, for example. Some of the other things that we've got, which I won't demonstrate here, but I compose an email with AI, adjust tone of emails, and those are again things that we'll look to pick up on more broadly across the firm. What should the tone of emails be that are going out to clients? So maybe we'll pick up tones that aren't quite right and set and change them to your set parameters for the firm. All of this is designed to help you be able to communicate better with your clients effectively and have those better conversations with clients, onboard staff easily, get people up to speed with clients. As I said there, the change of tone is something that we've built in. We're looking to flag things like importance of emails. So when you're in triaging Karbon, which is your effectively communications hub, we'll be flagging, this looks like a high important email, this looks like a low important email, so you can manage your inbox easier. We'll be putting in suggestions to help you understand where to allocate those emails, so we can move them to pieces of work, for example, for you. And some of the things that we're thinking about right now that are not firmly in our roadmap are things that we've discussed in terms of AI assistance, like how can we get the data that you need to manage your practice quicker by just kind of asking a bot, for example. So with all of that information that we've got, we can help you get the answers that you need to what you need to manage the firm. Anything that excites you here, Will, or anything that you're looking for that isn't kind of anything that I've mentioned here?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole AI agents is going to be a really interesting development over the next kind of 12, 24 months. So keen to see where that goes. Anything that can just kind of take away some of that admin stuff that we kind of have to do is going to be really important. So it's really interesting where it goes and where you go, and we're going to share a link to a webinar shortly that you guys are doing to talk in a bit more detail around kind of the AI vision for Karbon. So that's taking place at the end of August, but there's a QR code there if you want to sign up and hear a bit more about what's on Karbon's roadmap. There's stuff in there that Rowan is not at liberty to share at this point in time, but you can kind of hear all about it in that session. We are drawing to the end, because as I say, I always like to give you a chance to jump off before your next appointment and your next hour block. But if anybody has any questions, pop them in a Q&A box and we'll take those. But Rowan, if you can skip on to the next slide, whilst you put your questions in, if anybody's got them. I think it's always important that we highlight perhaps some of the key takeaways from the session for you here. So first of all, prioritize training for you and your staff. Utilize resources. This whole AI thing is going to affect us whether we like it or not. So let's make sure that we are aware of what the opportunities are, what the threats are, particularly around, I made the point around policies. Make sure that you understand what your team might try and do with AI. And if you don't know they're doing it, how you're going to control it. Good AI, good information, good client experience, everything relies on good data. So that has to be step one. If we want to make the most of these technological advances, we have to have a good data strategy. We have to be making sure we have good data internally within our firms, but also we're creating good data for our clients as well. We've mentioned this a couple of times, so I hope it works. You've got to start asking the questions of your tech partners. What's their strategy around AI? What are they going to do? What are the tools that they're going to give you to enable you to work smarter, more effectively? And finally, see AI as the opportunity it is to get you and your firm closer to your clients. Ultimately, that's why we exist. That's what we do. It's about supporting clients. So any way that we can use technology to free us up to get closer to our clients has to be a good thing. Couple of questions in here. So can you provide examples of the best use cases for accountants and bookkeepers outside of report writing and emails? What can I do to save me time with my day job? Any thoughts there, Rowan?
I guess it depends on what you're doing um, as your day job, but the communication side does provide lots of efficiencies, the research side, and then you need to be looking at using tools that can help you with AI in whatever your tasks are, I think. Like, so I don't know exactly what those are, but there are, as Will has alluded to already, machine learning within common accounting platforms that people use that can be leveraged.
Yeah,
So if you're
and
not doing those things, do those to
yeah,
start with.
absolutely. As an example, I've used the stats a few times. Zero produced a report based on a survey that they carried out with a number of firms globally. Only 37% were using bank feeds. So straight away, if you're using cloud-based general ledgers and you're not using bank feeds, it said in the report 31% are using pre-accounting tools. So what this means is we've got 63% of users not using bank feeds. We've got 69% of users keying data into a zero or a QBO or Sage Business Cloud, whatever. So step one is make sure we're using the technology that's already available for us. Clearly, ChatGPT has given us the opportunity of reports and emails and research and everything else. But this is just the start. The move from GPT-4 to 4.0 in 18 months was a huge leap, and it's just 18 months. So ChatGPT 5 is going to be around the corner. So it'll be interesting to see what they do there. And
One other thing that I could just suggest is use a meeting assistant, right? We use these at Karbon, and some of them are really, really good. So if you're having a meeting online, you can just summarize that whole thing into 10 bullet points. And whenever someone else goes to look at, okay, what happened in that meeting, it's really easy for them to just get a feel for it.
yeah.
And there's plenty of them out there that are available.
Yeah, perfect. And one other question, somebody asking how bad is the staff shortages we're seeing, and at what level, bookkeepers, etc. So I think it's across the piece. it's not necessarily the topic of conversation for today, but I think even when we look at offshoring and outsourcing, we are seeing rates increase. They are becoming more competitive marketplaces in those environments where providers are utilizing offshore and outsource resource. Um, I think it's a mix at all levels. Fundamentally, there is a challenge in terms of the appeal of the profession. Are we doing enough to get people to understand what being an accountant really means? Um, so I think it's across the piece, Marie, in terms of the levels. The biggest challenges for us, particularly at the moment, is at kind of client manager level. Trainees is normally okay. We can get a steady stream of trainees, but the nature of their role is changing because of what the technology's doing. Um, so hope that helps. Let's look at using AI to tackle these resourcing challenges that we have. Let's look at how we're going to fill that 60% of capacity that's going to be created when we stop doing some of the things that right now we've been continuing to have to deal with in our firms. So we are at 20 past, so that's about at the limit of where I'd like to be. So thank you very much indeed for everybody for joining us. We will be circulating the recording. I would urge you to take a look at the Carbon full report that was produced on the state of AI. It's a really interesting read, and alongside some of the other great research that Carbon do. Thank you to Rowan for joining us and leading the session. Good to get on a webinar with you again, Rowan. And thank you again, everybody, for attending. Do watch the recording back. Do get in touch with Rowan or I if there's any other questions that you have. Enjoy the rest of your week, and thanks for taking the time to join us for this month's App of the Month webinar with Carbon, and we will see you next month. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks, Rowan.
Everyone,
Take care.
thanks.